It's like the self-talk thing. If you're surrounding yourself with an asshole yourself, he's going to beat you up.
Yeah.
And if you surround yourself with the right kind of self-talk, the possibilities are endless.
When have you just felt like quitting, giving up, changing directions completely, just walking away? What excuses did you use to not push through, not see something through? Listen, today we are going to break down a critical Shawnism. Pros keep playing. And this is like a commonality across all of these most successful people that I get to interview on this podcast. Pros just keep going. And where this Shawnism came from, I had the opportunity. Some of you know my kids play music. I play music. I've been, a semi-professional musician playing weddings and bars and nightclubs my whole adult life. I grew up playing the piano, singing in performing groups, and my own children got to participate in this talent show, like for our whole town a couple of years ago. My daughter, Pepper, who's like our lead guitarist at the time, she's 8 years old, 9 years old, I think. A lot of pressure, right? All my kids are on stage together, guitar, piano, drums, bass. But my daughter, Pepper, at 9 years old, is the lead singer with her little guitar and her amp. And when we set them up in the dark on the stage, and I got to be backstage helping them set up, I think I failed to turn her amp on. So she goes to sing Radiohead's Creep, and her guitar isn't working. So she can't hear her own playing. She can't sing on key for the first little bit where she's like the only, and the spotlight is on her at 9 years old. And the whole town is watching. And I was so proud of her because even though she was a little bit flat until the rest of the band came in and she could hear the music and the crowd didn't know what was going on, they don't know. They're just seeing. She kept going. She sang the song start to finish. She did not quit. She didn't run off stage. She didn't say, stop, stop, stop. I got to start up. She just kept playing. And so did the rest of the band because that's what they were trained to do. And at 9 years old, man, I was never prouder of my daughter. They didn't win the show. She was a little off pitch because of this whole situation, threw everybody off. We didn't win, but she kept playing. Pros keep playing. And there's nothing more I would have wanted for my daughter to learn from that experience than that. I couldn't care less if they had won the little scholarship or whatever it was, and even though and look, she came off stage, kept it together, and then bawled her eyes out. A sobbing 9-year-old, and the rest of the band's embarrassed and they feel so stupid and like, they know they're not going to win. Sadly, I couldn't have wanted anything more for them than to learn that lesson, even at a young age. Pros keep playing. We're going to break this down with a true pro. This is a 2-time Super Bowl champion, getting into how adversity is an opportunity, the importance of sometime reframing what success even means, lest we wrap up our lives feeling like a failure. That's important, because I love where we go in this conversation, making the point that not everybody's going to win. Not everybody's ever even going to have a shot at a Super Bowl. Does that make them a loser? How do we reframe our lives in a way that can help us not just feel successful, but recognize our true successes for what really matters? When it comes to challenges, we keep pressing through because you never know how close you are to that breakthrough. And in his case, almost retired, gave it one more shot and then won 2 Super Bowls because there's something worse than failing, right? It's being able to not live with failure because some failure is inevitable. This is such a good conversation with 2-time Super Bowl champion Chris Long of the NFL, who runs his own amazing podcast, Greenlight. If you haven't heard it, you're going to love this. Check it out. Today, we have an absolute legend in the house, someone who knows exactly what it means to keep pushing, keep growing, and most importantly, just keep playing. He is a Super Bowl champ, former NFL powerhouse, and now a sharp-witted panelist on Inside the NFL. But beyond the game, he's a philanthropist, a leader, and a guy who understands that success isn't just about making the play, it's about making a difference. From dominating on the field to tackling new challenges in business, media, and beyond, Chris Long embodies the mindset that pros don't stop playing. And today we are going to explore how resilience, adaptability, and an unshakable work ethic separate the good from the great, not just in football, but in life. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chris Long.
Hey, what's up, man? I was very flattered by that intro. We'll find out if it's true in my case, but yeah, I had a lot of fun doing what I did for a long time, and there were definitely moments where you had to keep pushing and keep playing. So I think I'm in the right podcast.
No, this is perfect. Look, you're a pro, multiple Super Bowl championships. So without thinking too hard, right? You get this Shawnism kicked over. Pros keep playing. What's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
I mean, probably just spending most of my career on teams that weren't very good, and it almost feeling like a foregone conclusion what was going to happen on Sundays when you showed up.
Mm.
It was like everybody in the building knew it, but us. In a lot of situations where, our team just wasn't very good, and we were all doing our best, but it takes 53 guys, and as you know, in the NFL, not every team gets to go to the Super Bowl, not every team gets to go to the playoffs every year, but it's pretty rare when a team doesn't win more than 7 games for almost a decade. And that's kind of what we went through. And so, to act as if it was easy day to day to get up and when the alarm clock went off and get in the car and just go to work. I mean, it wasn't always. Um, but the mindset of putting one foot in front of the other, the controlling what you can control, and the taking pride in looking at adversity as an opportunity, I think just served me pretty well. And serving me well just meant that I would continue to get my paycheck, that I kept my job, that I earned the respect of my teammates, that I earned the respect of the city I played in. Those are my goals. You try to, if you try to fix the whole problem in a team sport like that, you're not going to be able to do that. But what you can do is put your head down and worry about your job. And there are multiple ways to lead. I think my way to lead was to lead by example and lead through connection to your peers. Try to be the one who sprinted through the line, try to be the one who finished every rep, try to be the guy who looked at practice as a way to compete and set a tone where in our D-line group, although things were falling apart around us, we had to take a lot of pride in what we did. So, and there were times where we'd walk into the meeting and our defensive line coach, Mike Waffle, who is a Marine, you don't say was, he taught me that. He's always a Marine, even when he's coaching D linemen. He had a very impactful sheet of paper on the wall. And maybe you've seen this, but it's a picture of two guys with pickaxes, and they are hammering away, trying to dig for something. And it becomes pretty evident for the guy on top because he is right 5 feet away from a big diamond, and he's hammering away with his pickaxe. But you can see him get tired, and there's sweat on his brow, and he puts the pickaxe over his shoulder and he walks the other way and he gives up. And the other guy keeps hammering away. And it's right there. And the point of that whole thing was you never know how close you are to your breakthrough, whatever that breakthrough is. And it doesn't always have to be winning. Like for me, winning football games was right around the corner by virtue of changing teams.
Wow.
And that's luck. And, for some guys, it might have been hitting an individual milestone or just simply at the end of the day being able to look in the mirror and say, hey, I've conquered my fear, or I've learned to work, or I didn't give up. And so for some guys I play with, they didn't get to go to New England or Philly and end their careers on top, and most of their careers went just exactly like I just described it, and that's got to be tough. But I'm pretty sure when their head hits the pillow at night, if they did all the right things and they busted their ass, they can say, "Hey, man to man, me and the man in the mirror, I'm proud of you." And I got that experience, and I got the lucky experience of ending up on a winning team too. So it is just chipping away and not being discouraged by the losing. And although you know what might happen, you go out there anyways and you give it your best.
I mean, really, That image that you described, I've seen that image, these two guys, and you can see the diamond they can't see in the mountain, right? It's a cross section. I mean, really, that's your career in a nutshell, right? It would have been easy for you to be the first guy and at any point pack it in.
Yeah.
Hey, you served a long time, you made some good money, I'm sure, walk away. But you saw it through, and then you end up with not one but two
Yeah.
rings. I mean, that's insane, especially when you consider. I think that we don't always step back and just think about the numbers. By far, most of the best that end up in the NFL, and that's hard enough, will never get a shot, even a shot at a Super Bowl,
Right.
let alone being able to win a couple. That's amazing.
Now, again, it's you walk away from, you say, "Oh, I won 2 Super Bowls," and all of a sudden, 5 years prior, everybody was like, "How's your career going?" I don't really get to see you play much. You're on,
Mm,
Red Zone, and you got to buy the DirecTV package. But then by the end of it, playing in 2 big markets and getting a chance to win, everybody treats you a little bit differently. And
mm,
I was no different a person.
yeah.
I was no different a worker. I was actually not the same player I was. I was half the player that I was in my prime
Wow.
when I played on good teams. But um, the point I guess I'm making is the success doesn't really change who you are. You either have some good luck or you don't. Now, sometimes you make your luck, but in a team sport like football, it's important to remember when you have success, just like when you lose, it's not personal. When you win, it ain't personal either. When you win, you're surrounded by other winners that allow you to be able to win. And getting to play with guys like Tom Brady and LeGarrette Blount and Devin McCourty, Matt Slater, in New England, and then the list could go on, and then vice versa in Philly with all those guys I got to play with. They elevated all of our realities collectively.
Hmm.
Um, and had we been not together, who knows what would have happened. So as you find that success, at least when I found it, I tried not to let it change, you know, my concept of who I was in St. Louis. I didn't deserve to lose in St. Louis.
Mm,
You know what I mean? I know that was true. And it's not like you deserve to win in Philly or New England. You just stuck around longer than the other guys, you know? And that's all it is. To your point is it is just waking up one day at a time and saying, I'm not going to throw in the towel today. And I had plenty of those days. I had plenty of those days where I said, I don't want to play anymore. And when I got cut by St. Louis and got IR 2 years in a row, broke my leg and did my ankle as well. Tried to play through them, played like crap, just really questioned what I was doing. But ultimately, it just isn't in my DNA to stop working.
mm.
And I credit people that helped me along the way. Again, that's not me. That's my conditioning, and
Well,
and
there you
people
go. I mean,
people helped me along the way.
pros keep playing.
Yep.
And it's something that I learned. So for me, okay, so not a lot of people would know this, but I briefly mention it in my book if you're paying attention. But when I was little, I was in performing groups. I was in singing and dancing groups, and it was a crazy experience. It took me to China when I was 5 years old, and again at 10, performing for these international exchanges. It was a really wild experience, but it was just a kids thing, a kids singing group. But they drilled into us from a very young age, like speakers stop working, microphones stop working, power goes out, whatever happens, someone falls down, you the show goes on, right? You learn this in show business. And here, you've had broken legs, you've been on, let's just say, bad teams for a decade, and you keep playing. And you end up in the end, like you say, there's so much to unpack with what you said. So I just want to dig into a couple of those
Yeah.
moments. First of all, unlike business, so this is one of the most poignant things that emerged from my conversation on this podcast with Urban Meyer was how exhausted he felt after winning a championship, because it's kind of like, now what? Like, I was thinking about this. My daughter loves Patrick Mahomes. I don't know why. She's
Mhm.
10 years old, but like a lot of like little kids, they have their NFL idols. And we were talking about it yesterday. And I was thinking about Patrick, thinking how bummed he was to not get his three-peat or whatever.
Yeah.
okay, no one's going to feel that bad
Right.
for even anyone in the NFL, as you know, like that's a weird psychology. No one feels bad for you. You're a millionaire.
Yeah.
No one
Yeah,
feels
no
bad for
question.
you. You're playing football for
And they shouldn't. I mean, you can empathize with people, but feeling bad for somebody is a whole, like, hey, listen, I wasn't working in a coal mine. I get that, right?
but
Yeah.
what I took away from Urban was how weird is it that in your line of work, okay, maybe you're highly paid, whatever, but you still have to, this is your career, this is your life happening to you, and you cannot control fully the team that you're on. You can't just make it happen. You're on a losing team for lots of reasons. We can't even unpack. It's a lot of people involved. It's money involved. It's,
Yeah.
whatever. It's the league, it's timing. And yet this is your career happening to you. That's like a crazy place to be where like people in my seat, okay, if Mark Company's, losing, I have lots of ways that I can change that reality. You can't even
Right.
change that reality, but you
Yeah.
still want to show up as the best defensive, that you can possibly be. And
Yeah.
that's a crazy psychology. Like that.
And it becomes harder to be that person when things aren't going well. And so I certainly have come away like I think, well, yeah, I mean, people don't have to feel bad. I feel bad for players when things aren't going well because I know that side of it. I know those are human beings in the helmet, and being a human being doesn't change because you've lived your dream for a Sunday or for a year or for a couple years. Like once you get there, it ain't like you're looking around like, oh, this is the best thing in the world. Like I'm here. Every day you're under a lot of pressure and somebody wants to take your job. And as you get older in the NFL, they want younger players. They want, every time you could play as well as you want one year, the next year you show up and they're going to have five rookies that are younger, maybe bigger, faster, stronger. And so you're always trying to preserve, your spot on the team
Wow.
while being a team player, and while worrying about the bottom line for the team, which is winning and losing. Although you can be on a winning team and get cut a couple months later because individually you didn't add enough or you didn't do a good job. And so, it's just the NFL is not simple. And I feel for a lot of guys, like I had a teammate, James Laurinaitis, who did all the same things I did. And this is why when people are like, hey, good karma for you, like, you stuck it out. No, no, no. Just because you stick it out doesn't guarantee you anything.
Mm,
I was lucky. James Laurinaitis and guys like him, who were released the same day as me when they moved to LA, were working just as hard, if not harder. I mean, we all would like to think we worked the hardest, but they're guys just like you. And James ended up in New Orleans and didn't get to win, and
mm,
got hurt down there, and his career ended basically a year or two later. I played with veterans who taught me what I needed to learn to be able to persevere. But the reality for them early in my career was St. Louis is kind of the only thing they ever knew, whether it was James Hall, who played in Detroit and St. Louis, or it was certain guys that were drafted to the St. Louis Rams. And
and that's their career. And they had the same dreams. They were some 13 or 18 or 23-year-old kid that was sure mentally, and by the way, taught to be sure that they were going to win the Super Bowl.
yeah, or that things are going to go well. Guys get hurt. There are injuries that change your career. I mean, my career was totally changed by the injuries that happened to me. I
Mm,
got up off the mat, so nobody was like, "Hey, injuries ended his career," but injuries changed my career. And if I didn't pick the right teams, I probably would have just been a washed up guy somewhere, and people would have been like, "What happened to him?"
wow.
Just everybody deals with obstacles, and whether that's in life or in football, in team sports, but especially in the NFL, where the average career is 3 years. If something bad happens to you year seven, you're still lucky
Yeah.
because you were there year seven. But it's really hard to wrap your head around that thing when it feels like your entire life's work.
Well, and when you're in it. So what advice do you have for someone who's in it? You're on year 4 or you're in year 7. And not just the NFL obviously. I'm talking about in life. And you're on a team, whatever that means to you, or a company or a situation or a job or a life situation. This could be a family member that has some kind of disability that's really made your life not what you imagined, right? What advice do you have for someone to, in this spirit of pros keep playing? And you were there, you were in that moment. You couldn't know you were close to that diamond.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for someone that's in that moment?
Well, I just Googled the world population, Sean. It's 8 billion people.
Mm,
Um, and I think for me, and I'm not perfect at this. I still am like, I have a problem. I think it's the worst problem ever. Like it's
mm,
only me, and that's human nature, right? Like even when you try to think the right way, you fall into those traps. But like there's 8 billion people on the planet. Everybody's got problems. Everybody has setbacks. And guess what? Not everybody succeeds.
mm-hmm.
You have to define what your success is. And that might not be a Super Bowl. It might, for some of my friends, it wasn't even close. They never sniffed the playoffs. But you have to, if you can, and it's easier said than done, give yourself the approval. If you've met your goals and you can look in the mirror at the end of the day, regardless of the setbacks happening in your life, if you respect the person in the mirror,
Yeah.
you've done something. And like, hey, you might lose that job, you might miss out on that opportunity, you might lose a game, you might get hurt and never play again. But if you're like, hey, there's 8 billion people on the planet, did somebody have it worse than me? Did somebody have a worse break than me? I'm pretty sure there was a kid that was born with a disease that somewhere today, and that kid's not going to see 10 years old.
Yeah.
Like, and I know it's easy to say when the issues that I'm grappling with are issues in the context of being a highly paid athlete, but everybody's problems are relative, right? Like we're all struggling with something, and it's the biggest deal in the world to us. And so I think sometimes if you remind yourself, like, you ain't the only one with problems, and success, maybe you need to reframe that sometimes. There's like ideal success. There's, hey, realizing your dreams, but you also have to have a goal in mind of like, I'm gonna love myself, I'm gonna respect myself, and I'm gonna be thankful for the ride. And I'm gonna know that, hey, like I went out and laid it on the line, and wherever the chips fall, I have to be able to live with the result. Because what's worse than failing is not being able to live with failing.
Mm,
And so like that to me was, and I was prepared to do that when I was going to retire after year 8. After I got hurt, I was going to retire.
mm-hmm.
And Bill called me, Belichick, and ended up going up New England, and I decided
Wow.
not to do that thing we talked about, throwing in the towel. But I was ready, if I did, to live with it, and to say, hey, I've been playing football my whole life. I've accomplished a whole lot, and ask my teammates if I was a good teammate. Ask my teammate. You start to reframe what's important. And really, all along, that was what was important to me, anyways. Am I respected? Am I working as hard as I can? Did I ever turn down a challenge? And did I ever quit? And I never did. And so even if we lost both those Super Bowls, I'd be okay today. You know what I mean? I got 3 kids. I'm healthy. I walked outside. It's beautiful outside. I live in a beautiful place. I got an awesome family. Like everybody's got something that they can fall back on and say like, hey, my life's still pretty good. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
boil everything down to a binary. Did you do it? Did you not?
I think it's great. And I think that in a world where, like this podcast, right? Podcasts like it, we are trained and conditioned to manifest the future, to manifest our best outcomes and go get them and succeed. That's really the nature
Should,
of
yeah.
so much media right now, which is fantastic. And by the way, I won't tell you to do anything different. On the other hand, it's cool to hear a person who uh, really met an end. Like you said, you were prepared to retire at year 8. You had reframed your definition of success to a place just like you're taught to frame your successes and to manifest. It is not a cop out to reframe your definition of success in a way that you can uh, feel good about your life, about what you've contributed.
Yeah.
Had you not had those 2 extra years, it sounds like you could have finished in a good place and had a fantastic balance of your life because of that reframing. And I think it's really important because we often don't talk about that. We kind of just keep talking about, the future and winning and like success in those kind of obvious binary win the Super Bowl terms. And I think that's a really important and healthy way to look at things.
And I want to be clear, like that doesn't mean don't chase your goals. Like, hey, the game, the real game you should be playing is you should be chase your ass off. Do whatever you can. If you're passionate about something, do whatever you can to make it happen. But realize that not everybody wins. Like that's just not the way. So redefine what a win is. Reframe what a win is, because I can guarantee you, even if at the end you're looking at it like, oh, I failed, you probably won somewhere along the way, if you really put yourself out there. And I think that's the one thing you don't want to wake up in the middle of the night one day and say, I never put myself out there. I never took a chance. And so, I took a lot of chances and I regret some of them. And you have to learn to live with your regrets, and you have to learn to live with your failures. And, the important thing is, though, if it comes to like, I'm worried about what other people think about my failures, then full stop. Like, and I struggle with this now. Like, what do people think? I've gotten a
Mm,
lot better at that. Um, and I used to care because I took pride in what I did, right? Like people say, it's not personal. I'm going to criticize you. It's not personal. Or, hey, you're not a great player. It's not personal. Or I didn't like what you just did. It's not personal. Well, BS. Everything's personal, right? But the point is, everybody that if you've got something you're embarrassed about, if you've got something you're struggling with, and you're worried about what people think, I wonder if anybody's thinking about you but you in that very moment.
yeah,
And so what you're doing is like you're creating a daily hurdle for yourself when the people you're imagining thinking about you are not at all. They're thinking about their own problems.
that's so good. And by the way, I think it I, I think it ties back to our topic so nicely. Pros keep playing. What we think are huge, like for instance, you know, as a defensive player, you're seeing things happen in real time that no one else is even aware of. Movements, changes, shifts, mistakes, stuff that gets missed obviously by refs, the obvious kind of stuff. Meanwhile, like the stadium's loud, right? Like the game's moved on.
Yeah.
Like someone's still whining about a call from 3 plays ago. You move on, right? And so I think the same is true with life. Like these things that we think are cataclysmic, you forgot someone's name, you botched a presentation, you fumbled over your words, you whatever it is, man, like nobody cares. You think they care. You think you're humiliated. By the way, you might have had a whole crowd laughing at you. They've already moved on. They forgot. It was a funny moment.
Don't remind them by becoming, you know, a person that's clearly stuck in the past.
And you're mortified over something that like no one else is even thinking about. And by the way, now a week has passed, a month has passed, maybe a year has passed, maybe you're depressed. The world doesn't even care. And I don't even mean that in like an insensitive way. I mean that as a matter of fact. Nobody cares. You're living your own life. Nobody cares what car you drive. Nobody cares when you messed up or didn't. And everybody's just kind of busy with their own crap. And the sooner we realize that and just keep playing,
Yeah.
the more likely we are to create our own luck. And then who knew? You
Yeah.
went and won a Super Bowl
The
or
que the
two.
question is, do you care? Like, what do you think? Like,
Mm.
that to me is, like, the most important thing, and to do that in a way that's conducive to you improving and being happy and like, "Hey, I'm still working on all this," so I'm not saying I'm like a damn I got it figured out, but I would say, like, you gotta love yourself, to really, to hold yourself to a realistic standard. You can't be too harsh on yourself. What do you think? And be honest, be tough on yourself, like imagine you're your friend. What would you say to your friend, your best friend in the world? You wouldn't beat your best friend up over failures.
Yeah.
You wouldn't tell your friend, "Oh, you suck. Like nobody likes you. You were terrible at that dinner party last night. Like it was awful. Like you're so awkward." Or like, "Hey, you tripped and fell." You would tell your best friend, like, "No big deal, dude. Like you're messing up today over yesterday." And so, just try to give yourself damn slack. Now there's some things that are life and death for people, whether it's like putting food on the table for their families and or getting something done that's it's either you do it or you don't. Like I don't know what those situations would be for people listening, but I think you can tell the difference between something that's like gravely important to you and your loved ones and something that you got attached to, whether it's a goal or a benchmark you had in mind and you're not there yet.
Yeah. I love what you say. In fact, two tactical things that really stick in my mind to build on what you were just describing. Number one, they've proven that our minds, our subconscious really can't tell the difference between our thoughts and actual occurrences. So what I'm trying to describe is our self-talk is way more important than we think. And while look, we can kick ourselves in the butt for a second, sometimes that can be motivating. We have to be really careful with what we say to ourselves. And I'm always catching myself like, don't call myself an idiot. Don't call myself, don't call myself names. Don't dwell on that kind of thing because your mind is trained to believe what it hears. And we have to really protect ourselves from that. Even though we kind of feel that way at times, I really catch myself in my self-talk. And number two, I love what you said about giving advice to ourselves. Like we are so much better at giving advice to others. This is again a psychological proven fact. People give great advice to their friends and terrible advice to themselves. So whenever I'm faced with like kind of a big decision or I find myself really debating something like, should I do this and there's no right answer. I really back up and ask myself, okay, if my friend had this situation, what would I tell them to do? What advice would I give them? Because what's crazy is that's always better advice.
And hey, listen, if you think of yourself as two people, the observer of the thought process, like you kind of can hover over yourself and be like, hey, see yourself outside yourself a little bit. Like you can't hate the person. You got to love the person. You got to at least respect the person you're giving your advice to,
Mm.
because I'll tell you, there's been times in my life where I've been like, I hate this guy. What, like, he's the dumbest person ever. Or he can't get anything right. And sometimes it's Tuesday. It ain't 10 years ago. It's like last week or something where I'm screwing everything up around the house, or I make a mistake, or I can't figure something out with work, or I fail all the time as a boss. You
Mm.
know, and as a dad, hopefully a lot less, because
Jeez.
with priorities come commitment. If you're really committed to something, you're not going to screw up at those things as much. But like, uh, you have to give yourself some grace. Like nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And if you get in this habit of beating yourself up, you become Mike Tyson real fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Look, I mean, this is the best advice from a two-time world champion. It's worthy of listening to, and it's humble advice. And I love that you brought up earlier, you brought up throughout this podcast luck. You say I got lucky. You got traded to a winning team, from a team that was doomed to just not win for a long time. At the same time, as we say on this podcast a lot, you created your own luck by the fact you kept going, you kept playing, you showed up as that pro, even as you said, I love you called out past your prime. You were still showing up the best that you possibly could. This is all such a good example for all of us. And if you had to, just look, leave one piece of advice, the name of this podcast, let me save you 25 years. You're talking to yourself, 20 years ago, whatever it is, a couple decades ago. Anyone that has dreams of winning a Super Bowl, and they
yeah,
may or may not get lucky because not everybody gets lucky. But what's that one piece of advice you could give someone to save themselves a chunk of their own 25-year journey?
man, I would say surround yourself with the right people. Honestly, who you spend your time with is so important. I can, as I look back at my journey, like I have personality traits that I can clearly draw straight lines to certain people,
Hmm.
and some of them are good and some of them aren't great. and they're habits you pick up along the way, whether it's a teammate or a coach or an experience. And certainly sometimes you're not going to be able to control your environment.
Yeah.
And then you have to really go back to, who am I? But surround yourself with the right people, surround yourself with people that know you and know where you're trying to go and respect it. And if they don't, you have to make some hard decisions. I think who you surround yourself with is so important, because we're all really, really easily influenced, more easily influenced than we know. I mean, it's like the self-talk thing. If you're surrounding yourself with an asshole yourself, he's going to beat you up.
Yeah.
And if you surround yourself with the right kind of self-talk, the possibilities are endless. And so when I'm in a groove you know, where I'm talking to myself the right way, it's no different than being in a room full of the right people. And when I've
Mm.
been in those rooms, I did better, like winning. You know what I mean? So I think surrounding yourself with the right people is huge. And it sounds easy, but now go try to apply it and look at some of the people you're going to have to distance yourself from. And there's some people that you should be running down to humble yourself and ask them questions. There have been
Mhm.
people in my life that I became like I was like an annoying little brother to some of my teammates, and that's what it takes.
Seeking out mentors, seeking out role models, being brave enough to open your mouth and get those people around you. Now you surround yourself with a family. You've succeeded ahead. You never won Super Bowls.
Yeah, that feels good. That's the best group to surround yourself with. I mean, it's been after football's been a challenge. I've had to relearn a lot of things, and football leadership doesn't always cross into business or media leadership or any of that stuff. And fatherhood, I can certainly draw things from my career, but like life is about learning constantly. Like you've never arrived. If you start thinking, here's one more piece. If you start thinking there's a destination, you're going to be disappointed. There ain't no
Hmm.
destination.
There's only the journey.
Just keep rolling.
Pros keep playing. And that's the thing, man. You're a pro. And how satisfying is that? Like, yeah, you won 2 Super Bowls. Most never get a sniff of it, but you kept playing and you kept playing even after you felt, I think, like quitting or like retiring. And that decision ultimately led you to, the sort of like glorified destination that you were lucky enough, as you admit, to achieve. And I think it's just such a good example. And by the way, some will be lucky, some won't. So
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
if nothing else, take Chris's example. Pros keep playing. And by the way, be sure to follow Chris on Twitter, as I do, at JOEL9, number 9, ONE. What's that? Joel91. What's that?
Yeah, a nickname I picked up in St. Louis. It was really hard to explain, but
All right.
uh,
Good
no,
enough.
there's a guy named Joel back in my hometown who I really look up to a great deal. So he was a character. So, anyways,
That's cool.
yeah, and then I got my Instagram handles from Eastbound and Down, so a lot easier.
Yeah. On Instagram at
La Flama Blanca 95.
La Flama Blanca 95.
Shout out to the great Kenny Powers.
Heck yeah. And be sure to check out Chris's weekly podcast, The Green Light with Chris Long, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much to the dynamic defensive end, the strong man of St. Anne's, Belfield, the sequential Super Bowl winner himself, Mr. Chris Long. Thank you for your wisdom and your generosity.
Thank you, Shawn, and thank you for my awesome couch and all the great gear you guys set up for us down in New Orleans. We had a great week. Missed you down there. We'll see you next time.
That's right. Chris is a big love sack family member. Grateful to have his support. And remember, if you are ever faced with any kind of challenge, don't talk yourself out of it. Test yourself, push through, because pros keep playing. Just might save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey.
Once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging on.